Legendary record executive, A&R representative, and record producer L.A. Reid recently sat down with R&B Money Podcast, hosted by Tank. And during the interview, he talked about the quote-unquote industry button concept and what he learned from Clive Davis. So let's go ahead and play this video.
How long did it take to garner success as a label?
First couple of years were really rough because we didn't really know. We thought we knew. We had so many hits at that time, right? I mean, we thought we knew. And I'll tell you exactly when the turning point happened, right? So it took close to 3 years to really have a legitimate hit. And we signed this group called Damian Dame. First act. Face and I produced the entire album. And Arista, our joint venture partners, put out a single. And it was doing okay. So I went to Clive Davis and I said, Clive, I need you to push the button on this thing, man. He said, what's the button? I said, like you did for Whitney Houston. I need you to push the button. We were at a conference when I said this to him. He said, the button, huh? He said, sit right here. I sat down beside him, right? Anyway, Whitney Houston comes on stage and Whitney Houston sings. And he looks at me and he said, that's the button. He said, no. He said, do they sound like that? And I was like, oh, so what you telling me is my shit is not hot? Oh. Because I really did think, record labels, they take talent, good, bad, or indifferent, and they push the button, and shit goes, right? That's what I thought. So, Clive, push the button.
This button that we've all heard about.
This button.
It's a button,
Sit down right here, young man. Let me teach you something. And then I saw it. I was like, oh, get it now. Yeah. And I thought I knew, but when you're a producer and a writer,
side of the game.
And when everybody's hiring you to make records, you start thinking that start thinking that you're the shit, you know?
It's you. You think you're sweet.
Right.
And I was like, wait a minute. Oh, so signing talent is, that's different than producing talent. Oh, so it ain't about us anymore. It's about getting the right. So got it. So then, we got lucky and signed TLC.
Signed the button.
And Tony Braxton.
Here's the thing. I'm not sure if you guys remember Damian Dame.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. Rest in peace. Both members passed away kind of randomly and tragically.
That's the one that had, when it gets down to it, remember the dude had like kind of burned out situation. Yeah. And I remember liking the song when it hit, but it's not a Whitney Houston record. Absolutely not.
And it once again, it's the different. I coming from radio and records and having a little bit of that curtain pulled back. And I've talked about this before. Yes, there are buttons that get pressed. It may not be the button that some people like to talk about, but I just watched the whole video today about in 2005 how it got exposed, how people were getting PlayStations and hotel stays. They couldn't give them cash because everything was on credit cards and expense accounts. But still money is being paid to move things up and down the charts, even if they, the program director or music director winds up putting things in the middle of the night, that still shows up on BDS and it doesn't say overnight spin. So there's still that sort of thing that goes on. I remember when I was working for Clear Channel in St. Louis, like all of a sudden there was this whole palette almost of Xboxes that showed up. I was like, wait a minute, nobody in here is even a gamer. Like my program director had one just sitting in his closet. And I was like, yo, can I get this Xbox? And it was like, no, because I don't know. They probably was going to finagle that to get something else done. But there are buttons that are pressed. I don't want anybody to think that just because Whitney Houston was Whitney Houston, they weren't pressing buttons for her. Right. Because once again, when you listen to the radio and they do something and it's like a whole weekend, it's like, oh, and you can get a flyaway and to see Alicia Keys. And I'm just using her as an example. These are the sort of things that happen to move things up and down the chart when they're not happening organically. So yes, there is a button, but it's also, hey, you have to sign the right people because there's less of a button needed when you have TLC, Tony Braxton, Outkast, and Usher, And honestly, Usher wasn't a hit his first time out. You make me a lot of people think that's his first song. It's like, no, he had a whole album before that.
Whole album.
That had joints on it, but, it wasn't his time yet. And so, man, I think the record industry is just is dirty.
Buttons exist.
Exist. Payola still exists in different ways. We've talked about it, how maybe they're not talking to program directors now, but they might be talking to people who create playlists. and there's no legislation to say that you can't do that yet. But when Elliot Spitzer ran all up and through Hot 97 in 2005 to see who was getting paid what, and they fined him like $5 and $10 million. These record companies, Sony and Universal, whatever. But when these companies are making $6 billion and $10 billion, okay, $5 million. Yeah, we'll give that. We'll break that off because for whatever it was we got out of it, it's worth more than that anyway.
And we already know that Spotify's and is in bed with record labels.
All the record companies, yeah.
This stuff has been exposed even like recently in the last year or so, multiple times. And playlisting and how like
the Drake lawsuit.
Yeah, well, the distribution companies are trying to stay relevant, and they're connected very closely to the record labels, which on the other side of it, you have your actual distribution platforms, and they're all talking to each other. We all know it. So, I
just think it's different now, though, because I think there was merit to what he told him back then, because back then it was more artist development. It was more that went into picking the people that you were picking. Now, you can push the button on anybody that got 1 million views on YouTube. Yeah. In my opinion,
I feel like the difference back then. I feel
like talent was more.
I feel like Clive was gassing him. Like I feel like
I don't think he was gassing.
Absolutely, because
I think talent was leaned on more back then than it is now.
It doesn't matter. But at the same time, like
he knew the formula.
He knew, yeah, exactly. He just knew the formula. He's like, Whitney Houston is the button. Yes, we pushed the button on Whitney Houston.
But Whitney Houston had also sold about 30 million records by the time this story is taking place.
Absolutely.
I'm just saying,
if not more.
Yeah, it was. I do agree with Mike on that.
Yes, there's a little bit for sure.
Different. There's different nuances that went on back then, but
the buttons
there were
remained.
still buttons that were being pushed in, because for every Whitney Houston and Michael Jackson whose talent spoke for itself, is still like, if you think about how long it took Mike to get where he was at. Mike was a star when he was a kid.
A whole star. Facts.
And that was part of the star powers because he was a kid.
Yeah.
And once he grew up, when Ben and all that stuff came out, his star was kind of dimming at that time.
People think that Off the Wall is his first solo album.
Yes,
no. He had like 5 solo albums on
solo
Motown.
albums before that.
True.
His button that he pushed was getting with Quincy Jones, somebody that knows the ins and out of the music business, to guide him the right way. You can consider that a button.
Yeah, money's
but
a button.
He was talented, and his talent and work ethic spoke for that. Now, Whitney Houston had one of the best voices of all time, and she had Clive Davis behind her. Clive Davis is a cheat code. If you think about everybody that Clive Davis has put on, whether it be, we just said Whitney Houston,
Aretha Franklin, Janis Joplin,
more recently Mariah Carey.
Was that
at the end of Luther's career? He was responsible for
on J Records. Yes.
He was responsible for actually giving Luther the shine that Luther wanted overall. You know what I'm saying? He's a cheat code in itself. Somebody that knows the ins and out of the music business, the way that it was ran back then, is definitely somebody that can push buttons. Now, he may not be saying that he actually gave me a cheat code. He's giving you like little bits and pieces. He gave me some game.
That's all it is.
And he probably helped him a little bit to push these acts.
No,
at the end of the day.
I think that's exactly what that's literally what he said. He's like, the button right now is this.
Yeah.
You need to find this.
Yes.
It's just, you can't just put anybody in that situation.
You can't just put anybody in that situation. It has to be somebody that knows what they're doing and is going to be marketable, essentially. You know what I'm saying? Even Babyface was a solo artist before they made LaFace Records. And he did good when it comes to urban music. But he wasn't LaFace Babyface, you know what I'm saying? Writing songs for Eric Clapton and things like that. They were able to get entwined to where they could push the buttons themselves. You know what I'm saying? Now, because
the button at one point was Babyface wrote and produced this.
Yeah,
that's all we need to know.
Yeah. Babyface, you doing records with Madonna now?
Yeah.
Oh, we going.
It's just like he said. It's just like he said with Quincy Jones. The two have to meet. Michael Jackson had all the talent, right? We know Michael Jackson was talented, but Quincy was already a GOAT. So there had to be a reason they met together. They saw something on both sides for that to go. And then, to y'all point, Quincy definitely tapped the button. 100%.
It's going.
100%.
And nowadays, the new button is the the what do they call them? Industry plant.
Oh yeah.
Nobody has actual factual things on any of these artists that people are calling industry plants. It's just because you don't think that they're talented enough to be in a position to be in the artist position that you deemed as talented.
But even Michael Jackson
is this algorithm related?
had a button for Thriller because when early MTV said, "Nah, we don't want to play Billie Jean." Walter Yvetnikoff, I hope I got his name right. He said, "Okay, you don't want to play Billie Jean. You won't play anybody on CBS Records." Mm-hmm. That's a button.
Yes,
facts.
Yeah.
So when you have,
sure.
So because Mike based on his talent and based on the fact that Off the Wall sold 15 million records, that wasn't enough for MTV to say, yeah, we'll play this record. Mm-hmm. Even MTV was so racist, and I'm sorry, I got to use that term.
No, it's facts. Yeah, it's facts.
Was so racist. Apologize. They would not play hit records.
Yeah,
certified hits by black artists. Yeah. Like, and the crazy thing is, every time David Bowie, God bless the dead, his birthday comes up, or they talk about David Bowie, they bring up that interview he did with Mark Goodman, who was one of the VJs at MTV at the time, and he said, "Well, why don't you? There are other stations, because there were still local video shows." And whatnot, maybe public access at that time. And David Bowie was like, "I see these black artists, and it's like, why am I not seeing these? These are songs that people like." And Mark Goodman literally said, "Well, we got to play for everybody. And Prince might scare somebody in Iowa." Now, just imagine anybody else trying to get played if they're worried about Prince scaring middle America.
And not David Bowie? David Bowie was different characters on every album.
You could be a different character and be white, but if you're a Prince and you dance around a little bit and you got on a little eye makeup, they're worried about. So why do you think it took till 87, 88 for them to actually try to have a whole show about hip hop?
Yeah, well, David Bowie was actually enlisting funk and R&B artists into his band because that's what he was influenced by. I mean, we just talked about Luther Vandross. Luther Vandross was a part of David Bowie's band at one point in time. But to your point, Michael Jackson got the button. He definitely got the button pushed on it because he was on MTV and Prince wasn't at the time.
True.
Like if you were watching Prince videos, they were all on BET.
BET, or I remember there were local shows. Yeah. This is the thing. We talked a little bit about the show Nick Rocks, and the crazy thing is Nickelodeon was owned by Viacom, which also owned MTV at the time. Still does, I believe. And the reason, we talked about the El DeBarge record, that never got played on MTV.
Nah.
But it's they're well, these songs are popular. We'll put them over here at Nick Rocks. That's the only place I saw Curtis Blow Basketball or New Edition or even Menudo. They wouldn't play Hispanic records, on MTV either. They might talk about them in the little news segments, but they I want you to think about this because people say, "Oh, well, what about when Herbie Hancock, the very first MTV Awards, he won Video of the Year." Look at that video. Herbie Hancock's not in it.
Not at all.
So as long as
it's dummies and puppets
and mannequins and all this other stuff, but to have a black face was that was harder for MTV to stomach than puppets and mannequins and stuff moving around. So I mean that's crazy. And the crazy thing is Eddie Murphy hosted the show. They could have a black host but wouldn't play black artists. Back to the button. Yeah.
The button exists.
There's definitely strange
whether the button is a flyaway, whether the button is free Xboxes or PlayStations, whether the button is I can influence whether or not you'll get videos from the rest of my artists on this label. If you, once again, it should be, we always think, oh, if I'm good enough and there's a meritocracy, it just isn't that, guys. In fact, it hasn't been that since Alan Freed and the first instance of payola and just getting this taken care of. They talk about, it's only evolved.
Mm-hmm.
It went from straight cash, to where the record reps would come through and pay your phone bill or your electric bill or maybe even your rent, to where everything was on credit cards, to where everything was gifts and packages and flyaways, to where now, like I said, I believe these record companies that own a part of these streaming services just have unfettered access to go up there and spend whatever money they need to spend to make sure you are at the top of the algorithm.
Think about
like
this.
A politician.
Think about this. Clive Davis is in every documentary that I love about music. They bring him up in the Stax documentary. He's brought up in the Sly Stone documentary, which is amazing. By the way, go check that out if you haven't seen it.
The Luther documentary.
The Luther documentary. He's in all of them. And we talking about from Stax all the way to Luther or Sly. Like, do you know how much time span that is? And he's always a person that. Thank you.
To Puff Daddy.
He's always a person that is a button pusher in all of those documentaries. That's crazy when you think about that. How long he's been a part of pushing the button.
To his credit, too, though, he has discovered some very talented artists. So I think that led to him being able to be in a position to where he can do that.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, he did his job very well.
That's true.
Any Joe Schmo can't do the same thing that a Clive Davis has done. Anybody can't do the same thing that L.A. Reid has done. I mean, his catalog and his resume is fire as well. I mean, he signed Pink too. Mm-hmm. People forget about that. We always think about the artists in Atlanta and surrounding areas that he signed, but he was very instrumental in getting Pink's career jumping off.
He signed some rock groups and L.A. Reid, but like when you just put his records on the table,
come on,
come on. There really isn't nobody in not just quote unquote urban music, but just pop American music that is more important than L.A. Reid. Once again, we're not just talking. Your talent is not enough. Your talent is not enough. You might be able to catch something viral now in this day and age, which is something that wasn't available, in, for lack of a better term, L.A. Reid's heyday. But now we're just in a place where these executives are less interested in your talent than they are your metrics, because the money is to be made in between the songs. So,
moral of the story: nobody cares how nice you are. Not a thing anymore. To a certain extent, it's about the metrics. It's about the numbers.
It's not a game changer.
Not at all.
Yeah, I mean,
not even close to being one.
Like that's just,
now, I hate to say that.
It's just the
added pushback. I have a little bit of pushback.
It's an added bonus. Otherwise, you wouldn't. But you wouldn't give Leangelo Ball a deal. You wouldn't
put it to the forefront.
That's the metrics.
No. That's all I'm saying.
It's all metrics. And that's what matters the most. If you happen to have talent, it's just a bonus.
It's an added bonus.